My name is Doijcin Ziv. I am from Croatia, and I'm a professor of church history here at Weimar Institute. We really like church history here at Weimar Institute. We focus on Reformation tour. We go to Europe to visit all the places that Reformation took place in the past. My emphasis was particularly on Joakim of Flore. Probably you never heard of this name. Joakim of Flore was an Italian monk in 12th century who had a dream one day, and he claims that God gave him an understanding of the book of Revelation. And when he wrote down his writings on the book of Revelation, his writings were very Adventist, very historicist. So much so that some medieval scholars call him medieval Adventist. Joakim of Flore, he was from Italy, and he developed the idea that one day equals 1 year in Bible prophecy. And he put 1260 days, and he says it is 1260 years of church history through the Middle Ages. And he believed that the church is in Babylon in his time, and he presented his findings to the Pope. And he said, church needs a reformation. The book of Revelation says that we are Babylon, we are Jezebel. The book of Revelation says that the 7 churches are 7 periods of church history, and we are now deep in apostasy, and we need reformation. And he presented his findings to the Pope. And the Pope said, this is very interesting. Why don't you make a Reformation movement that will proclaim your findings and ideas and reform the church? And that was very interesting because popes were not very interested in Reformation in the Middle Ages. And he presented his findings to 3 different popes, and 3 different popes gave a stamp of approval to Joachim. And he was not, surprisingly, burned at the stake. He was actually given permission to preach. And he built an order of reformers and Bible students that were studying Daniel and Revelation in the 12th century. And he predicted, according to the book of Revelation, there will be a reform movement, the 144,000, who will come to church out of Babylon. And so when Luther and Calvin came, they were looking at Joachim's writings, and they said, we need to do this. We need to reform the church. And Luther actually wrote a book that is quoting one of Joachim's writings. He wrote a book called From Babylon, The Babylonian Captivity of the Church, alluding to Joachim's idea that the church went to Babylon. You see, Joachim understood that the history of ancient Israel repeats itself in the history of the Christian church. History of ancient Israel, God's church, Israel, had 7 major stages. It has judges and Moses and judges and monarchy. And so he saw all these developments of stages. He saw that happening in the Christian church. And just like in the ancient Israel, there was Jezebel, and there was apostasy of Ahab, and Israel went to Babylon as exile, and went into Babylon. That's how also in the New Testament church, there's a 7 periods of the Christian church that even the church, the New Testament church, needs to go to Babylon exile. And then there will be a reformation, just like Ezra and Nehemiah. The 2 reformers brought the church out of Babylon. So the 2 reformers, he said, will come, who will take the Christian church out of Babylon. And when Luther and Calvin saw that, they understood that maybe this is a prophetic movement. Maybe the Protestant Reformation is prophetic, and Joachim saw it all along. And this was back in the 12th century that he had this understanding. And this is what I wrote my doctoral dissertation on. And this is what we go as a Reformation tour, Weimar Institute. We go to Italy to see the places where Joachim lived. We go to Rome, Florence, Waldensian valleys. We go to see the Waldenses. We go to Geneva, where Calvin was doing his Reformation. Then we go to Constance, where John Huss was burned at the stake. And then we go to Germany, Wittenberg, where Luther was proclaiming his dissertation. Luther even republished one of Joachim's writings. So there is a connection. God's truth has always been going through the Middle Ages. In the book of Revelation, chapter 2, God says to the church of Thyatira, which is the apostate church, the 4th church in the book of Revelation, it says that you have many in your church who do not hold the doctrines of the devil. and you have many in your church, and I don't put any other burden upon them. But what they have, let them hold onto it strongly until I come. Joakim is one of those who did not know the whole truth, but he had a glimpses of truth of that God gave throughout, even through the dark Middle Ages. God had his people that he led through until the full Reformation came, and then finally through the Advent movement. And this is what really my passion is. Our passion is here at Weimar Institute, to study God's movements, God Church, God Reformation movements throughout history, so we can know and see how can we have today a true movement of Reformation before Christ's second coming.